It is so wonderful to see so many attendees streaming in here from all over the world. And we are going to go ahead and get started. So thank you once again for being here.
Hello, everyone, and thank you all for joining us today. My name is Dr. Jim Kraft, and I currently serve as the chair of the Middle States Association Commission on Secondary Schools. It is my pleasure to welcome you to this special event where you will have the opportunity to meet our new president, Mr. Christian Talbot. You'll hear directly from him about how his background and experience prepared him for this leadership role and what he hopes to accomplish in his first year and beyond. Now, before I continue, I want to share a few housekeeping items with everyone. First, this event is being recorded today for future use. Second, because today's presentation is a webinar, you'll not be visible or audible to anyone unless you are the panelist. We have over 575 people registered for this event. With that said, we do encourage questions, and we ask that you please type your questions into the chat section of the Zoom. We may send you a private message in the chat and offer you the opportunity to become a panelist temporarily so that you can ask your question on video. After you ask your question, you will return to being a participant and remain invisible and inaudible to the other attendees. If you do not want to turn on your video, one of our team members would be happy to ask your question for you. We will get as many questions as time allows. If there are questions left outstanding, we will follow up after the webinar. Before I introduce Christian, I want to share my wishes to all of you for a great school year ahead. Undoubtedly, the year will have its ups and downs, but I hope that during those highs and lows, you remember that you are never alone as a member of Middle States. The Middle States Membership Network comprises over 2,700 schools and learning service providers in nearly 50 states and 115 countries around the world. Our diverse membership includes public, private, and independent schools, learning service providers, career and technical schools, and early education centers. We are proud of our 135-year legacy of being the worldwide leader in accreditation and school improvement. As Christian will explain, Middle States offers an incredible network of knowledge and experience. We look forward to partnering with each of you to continue fostering connections and unlocking the potential of this collective network. And now I have the distinct honor of introducing our new president at Middle States, Mr. Christian Talbot. Prior to assuming the role as president at Middle States, Christian served as interim president of Regis High School in New York. This was a return to Regis for Christian, where he previously spent 14 years as an English teacher and chaired the English department. Christian also served as head of school for Malvern Preparatory School in Malvern, PA. He's a lecturer at the University of Pennsylvania School of Social Policy and Practice and is the founder of Juno Strategy Plus Design, where he has worked with school leaders to design and execute strategic growth initiatives. Christian also founded Expeditionaries, which is a social entrepreneurship boot camp for high school students. He has served on several school boards, including Fordham Preparatory School in Bronx, New York, where he is currently a trustee. Christian graduated from Georgetown University with a bachelor's degree in English and art history and earned a master's degree in psychoanalysis from the Boston Graduate School of Psychoanalysis. Middle States Commissions appointed Christian as president after a lengthy search process. Christian stood out among a pool of highly qualified applicants because of his strategic approach to management and clear commitment to improving education for students throughout the world. Christian's background as a teacher and school leader, his experience with Middle States accreditation process, and his passion for education, innovation, and strategic growth and improvement make him uniquely suited to lead Middle States into the future. So now, without further ado, it is my great pleasure to introduce our new president of Middle States, Christian Talbot.
Thanks, Dr. Kraft, and thank you everybody for joining us today. I also want to thank you for being members of Middle States. And I also want to take a moment to express solidarity with our schools and our communities in especially Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, and it looks like perhaps other places in the Caribbean. I know that Hurricane Fiona has wrought some pretty significant damage. I know that Marian Martino from Colegio Arianis in Puerto Rico is with us miraculously on this webinar. So please know that we're sending you our prayers for quick recovery and all our best wishes. There are kind of two reasons today why we're here. The first is you may have heard it said that the smartest person in the room is the room. And I believe that the best school in the Middle States network is actually the entire network. And I'll say more about that in a little bit, but that's one reason why I think we're here today. And the next reason is that I want to give you all an opportunity to learn. Well, I want to learn what matters to you, and I want to give you an opportunity to ask me questions if you have any. We'll do that live Q&A in just a little bit. But before we get there, I thought I would share just a little bit about myself and how I came to Middle States. So if there's only one thing you need to know about me, it's that I knew exactly when and where I was when I decided I wanted to be an educator. I was 15 years old. I was in room 408 of Regis High School in New York City. And it was sophomore American Studies, American History, and Mr. Sabatelli was pacing the room. We were all 20 of us seated in a circle and talking about some big profound idea in American history. And he was so skilled at getting every single student in the room engaged. And most of us weren't particularly interested in the topic, but he found a way to kind of light a fire within us. And at that moment, I said to myself, this is what I want to do with my life. I want to create experiences for young people that set them on fire for learning and that inspire them to go out into their local, regional, state, national, and global communities to contribute to the common good. And I've never looked back. It's been 25 years full-time in education, and actually many years before that, part-time in education, and it's been the most worthy and important work that I've spent my time on. So in those 25 years, as Dr. Kraft said, I've been a head of school twice. I've consulted to many more heads of school and many more schools. And I also want to tell you a quick story about my experience with accreditation when I was the head of school at Malvern Prep. When I took on that job, I was handed a pretty ambitious change agenda by the board. And frankly, it was the reason why I sought the job, because I was really inspired by the opportunity to have wide impact. And I learned that the Middle States accreditation visiting team would be coming soon. And I was actually quite frustrated because I felt like we had so many other more important things to be spending our time on, and that the accreditation process would be, frankly, a bit of a distraction. Well, I could not have been more wrong. In the first phone call I had with the chair of that visiting team, it was obvious to me that he wanted what was in the school's best interest. He wanted what was in my best interest. And the most important thing he said to me was, Christian, you know, the school's strategic plan, your ambitions for the school, and the Middle States accreditation process are all congruent and aligned. And we can actually use this visit and this accreditation process to help amplify the impact you want to have and accelerate the change and the transformation of Malvern Prep. And he was 100% right about that. I'm so grateful to him for sharing his wisdom with me, and grateful to that visiting team. And I'm grateful to so many of you who have served on and continue to serve on visiting teams. And I'm grateful to the school leaders among you who identify and nominate and share with us members of your faculty and staff to be on our visiting teams, because that's where the magic happens in the Middle States accreditation process. The other thing that I want to share about myself is that I'm really passionate about helping schools and school leaders to identify what matters the most to you, and then to help you find the resources to pursue your vision. One of the things I've learned about myself is that I'm pretty good at helping people to do more than they think that they're capable of doing. And so the opportunity to be your partner is really exciting and a perfect match for me. And as for why I chose to come to Middle States now, at this particular moment in time, I believe that the world has never needed our schools more than the world needs our schools now. The work that you do to prepare young people to be contributors to the common good and to be effective citizens is profoundly important. And I know that that looks very different depending on what kind of school you lead or work in. But at the end of the day, we are all seeking to have that positive impact on students. And so I am really eager for this opportunity to help you do the work that matters, not just to your school communities, but really authentically to the whole rest of the world. And that leads me a little bit to my vision for this year at Middle States. I like to think of the 2022-23 school year as the year of the Middle States Network. And what do I mean by that? Well, as I said earlier, you've heard that the smartest person in the room is the whole room. And I like to think that the best school in the Middle States Network is the entire network. So this year we are going to be inviting you to participate in a series of experiences. Some of those things will be interviews and Q&As with experts. We're going to be offering executive leadership programs and many more things. And my hope is that as you experience these elements of the year of the Middle States Network, there are going to be 3 signs of success. The first is that you will expand your thinking about what's possible in your school. The second sign of success will be that you feel like you have access now to resources that can renew and even strengthen your leadership skills. And finally, I hope and really trust that you will discover kindred spirits among your middle school peers. So we are going to kick off the year of the Middle States Network on October 24th. I am thrilled to tell you right now that we will be joined in a webinar on October 24th by Michael Horn. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Michael Horn. I consider him to be one of the most important and truly influential thinkers about education innovation. He is a former collaborator with and colleague of the great Clayton Christensen, the inventor of the theory of disruptive innovation. Michael is the co-founder of the Clayton Christensen Institute at Harvard University. And his new book, From Reopen to Reinvent, is honestly one of the very finest books I have read on the question of school evolution. I strongly recommend that you get a copy. I have read this book twice. I never reread books. I have read this book twice, and it is filled with Post-it notes, with notes in the margins, with annotations and highlights. And I'm going to be interviewing him live on October 24th. And then those who join us for that webinar will have the chance to ask him questions. So you'll be getting an invitation for that a little bit later, hopefully this week. But please be on the lookout for that. And that will be, as I said, the first of many opportunities for you to experience the year of the Middle States Network. So at this point, we're going to transition to doing a Q&A. And I'm going to do my best to answer those questions, but I'll have a little bit of help in moderating by our Director of Marketing, Henry McCorkle, who introduced this event to you this morning. And I'll turn it over to Henry to facilitate this Q&A.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Christian, and thank you all for being here today. We really value hearing your voice and learning from you during this presentation. Some directions were just typed into the chat to everyone, which is to, when you type your questions in, please include your name and your school location. And my colleague Audra Chin is going to be moderating the chat and hopefully giving some of you a chance to come on video and ask your question to Christian on video as well. So we want to try to make this as interactive as we can. So I'm going to go ahead and start off with an initial question here. And this is a question that was typed into the chat, Christian, but they are asking me to ask it. So as the world has become increasingly connected digitally, how do you see MSA taking advantage of opportunities presented by Zoom and other technologies to connect member schools to one another?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for that question. Obviously, what we're doing right now is a perfect example of opportunities that we have to connect the members of Middle States literally all around the world. As Dr. Kraft said, We are in 2,700 schools in 115 countries and almost all of the United States. And so we have outlined a series of experiences that are largely digital that will allow us to connect with experts like Michael Horn, to connect with me and other members of the Middle States staff, for you to connect with one another through guided conversation. And we'll be doing a lot more of that, not just over this year, but over the coming years. So we are fully prepared at Middle States to take advantage of what technology can offer. And I noticed in the chat section as well that someone, I think from Cote d'Ivoire, asked about the details on Michael Horn. So I'll just repeat them again. You will get an invitation, but Michael Horn is the author most recently of a book called From Reopen to Reinvent. And the date of our webinar with him is October 24th.
All right. Thank you, Christian. And we have another question here that was typed into the chat, but they would like me to read it out to you. And the question is, as an organization that works with many different types of schools, how does MSA ensure that member schools feel supported and challenged throughout the accreditation process? Thank you. That's another great question. I think the most important thing we do first is we try to be very thoughtful about pairing schools with accreditation liaisons. So every school is connected to an individual associate vice president for accreditation, or what we sometimes call an accreditation liaison. And that person is hopefully your first and your trusted point of contact for any questions that you have. And of course, you can reach out to all members of the Middle States staff, but the accreditation liaisons really have diverse experiences. They have experiences in private schools and public schools and charter schools, in early childhood education, in K-12 education, and in post-secondary non-degree granting education. They also have experience with career and technical schools and learning service providers. So we really appreciate the incredible diversity in our member schools, and we try to make sure that the associate vice president for accreditation, who's assigned to your school, who is your partner in that work, brings some experience. And sometimes that experience is having worked directly in those kinds of schools. Other times that experience is having been on many accreditation visits to schools like yours. And then finally, I would say that our accreditation liaisons also tend to have some degree of regional experience. So you may be in the Middle East, or you may be in Western Africa, or you may be in Puerto Rico, or you may be in Ohio. And each region, we are sensitive to the nuances and the needs of each region, and we try to customize not only our conversation but our visiting teams so that they can really see the local flavor and the value that comes to life in your local communities. Thank you, Christian. So next we have a question from Marilyn George, and Marilyn is going to be coming on video to ask the question. So we'll give Marilyn a second here to appear on video, and the question will be asked at that point.
Christian, can you hear me?
I sure can.
Right. Welcome. I'm representing Western Association of Schools and Colleges, the executive vice president for 36 years. And I want to say, look forward to meeting you in person at AAIE. But my question is really, what are your thoughts on how we can work together collaboratively as you think about New England Council of International Schools, WASC, Cognia, the international accrediting agencies, and of course others? Just wanted to see your view or hear your view.
First, it's wonderful to see you, Marilyn. Thank you for the welcome. And I'm really happy to say that I've already had some conversations with your boss, Barry, and with Cam at NEASC, as well as some of the heads of other accreditation agencies around the world. And I've been really struck by how collaborative and collegial the community of accreditation executives is. And I'm excited to join that conversation over time. Beyond the collaborative nature and the collegial nature of our relationships, it's obvious that there is already in place an infrastructure for us to be having conversations about the things that matter the most to our member schools, but also maybe even across accreditation agencies. And I don't think of this as zero-sum work. I think of this as positive-sum work. If Middle States can support the work of the Western Association of Schools and Colleges and NEASC and Cognia and all the other many worthy accreditation agencies in the world, to me, that means we are having positive impact on students' lives. And if we have positive impact on students' lives, then we are living our mission, and good, positive, some outcomes will come from that. But to be a little bit more concrete, I think that there are some really big questions facing schools and therefore facing accreditation agencies. Yesterday and on Friday of last week, I huddled with a certain group within Middle States to do some futures thinking and thinking about big tectonic shifts that are taking place over the next, that are taking place now and that are going to affect the world over the next 10 years. And I think it's important for accreditation executives to be talking about futures thinking and forecasting and even doing some scenario planning so that our member schools are as well prepared as possible for a chaotic future.
Great. Thank you, Christian.
Thanks, Marilyn.
Welcome.
Thank you. Henry, do we have another question teed up?
We do. All right, so our next question is from Nabil Michel, one of our commissioners based in Egypt. And his question is, will visits this school year be occurring virtually, or will they be occurring in person on campuses?
Thanks for that question, Nabil. Great question. And our default option is for visits to take place in person. But of course, we are really sensitive to local needs. And so there may be certain instances where a school has very good reasons for preferring a virtual visit. And we will absolutely and happily entertain that conversation. So we're not doctrinaire about the in-person visit, although we do have a very strong preference for, and frankly, a default position around in-person visits. There's something about experiencing kind of the texture, if you will, of a school community by being there in person. But again, I'll emphasize that we really want to partner with our member schools to do what's in your community's best interest. And so that's always a conversation that we can have with you.
All right, thank you. We have another question here from Betty Gardner, another one of our commissioners. And the question is, does MSA currently have social media presence and specifically LinkedIn groups to share information with member schools?
Hi, Betty. I owe you a phone call. I know you called me and I have not yet returned that call, so my apologies, and I'm looking forward to connecting with you in person. Thank you for your question. It's a great question. I would say that our social media presence has not been as robust as it could be, and we've been talking about that internally a lot. We don't yet have groups either on LinkedIn or Twitter Spaces or other kinds of affinity groups and spaces, but that is on the short list of things, and in fact was something that this small group that I just mentioned a moment ago was talking about yesterday. So be on the lookout for that as part of the year of the Middle States Network and beyond, and I'm glad that great minds are thinking alike, Betty.
All right. Our next question is from Andrea Simon in Buenos Aires, Argentina. And the question is, could you expand on what the executive leadership programs will look like? And a quick follow-up, does MSA plan to host any annual conferences in the future?
First, bienvenida, Andrea. Thank you for those great questions. And it's a little too early to pull the rabbit out of the hat when it comes to the executive leadership programs. But what I do want to say is I have noticed, certainly in my own career, both as a head of school and as a consultant to schools, and I've also noticed in my early conversations with school leaders that probably the number one most urgently felt need for school leaders is learning how to facilitate change. It is the task of every school leader to do this. And we all know that evolution is not a choice. We either evolve as schools or we become defunct. And so the executive leadership program will focus specifically on change facilitation. That could be a whole doctoral degree in and of itself, but our approach is going to be really practical. We want to offer you tools, resources, and maybe above all else, a community of like-minded peers so that you feel that the specific change needs that you have in your school can be met using the resources that we can provide. As for an annual conference or convention, that's also something that we've talked about. We haven't decided yet whether that's something that we'll do, but it's great to hear you ask the question because I'm assuming that that signals some degree of early interest on your part. And on that topic, on the question of change leadership or any other things that really matter to you and to everybody else on this webinar, please drop something in the chat or reach out to us, and we would love to hear what feels like a useful resource that we can provide to you.
All right, excellent. Our next question is from Alexander Marcos, and he's based in Spain. He's going to be coming on video and asking his question momentarily. And we're just waiting for Zoom to do its thing and make Alexander appear for us here.
Hi, I guess you can hear me, but you can't see me.
We can hear you great, Alexander.
Okay, I guess it's okay. I don't mind if you can't see me. I'm calling from Spain, American School in Spain, and my point of contact is Priscilla. And my question is the following. There's a lot of talk about MSA focusing, of course, on leveraging a network and helping us network. And then there's lots of questions about, they're here to support us. My question is, what do schools normally ask for in terms of support from the MSA, and what can we expect in terms of support? Now, maybe the three major lines of action from your side. One of the areas I'm thinking of is recruitment, retainment of teachers, and professional development. But I don't mind. I mean, it's just for me to understand when MSA says, we're there to support the schools on the overseas international front, what can we expect?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Alexander. And you certainly hit on two of the things that we hear a lot about: professional development across all levels of a school. So teachers, staff, leadership, and sometimes even parents and alumni. So professional development is one area that we're looking to expand into and provide resources in. And again, over the course of this year of the MSA network, you can look for some opportunities in that area. Recruitment is something that we hear a lot about, and we have not yet devoted too much thinking to. But I agree with you that it is an urgent need, not only identifying and recruiting, but hiring, onboarding, developing, promoting, retaining talent is perhaps the number one catalyst for school evolution. And we also know that schools are the single most important point of leverage that we have for transforming the lives of our students. So I'll be curious to hear more from you and your peers about what would be really helpful there, and we'll see whether Middle States is the right organization to help you with that, or whether Middle States can partner with an organization or organizations to help you with talent recruitment. Another area where we often hear schools asking for help and assistance is translating a school improvement plan into a genuinely strategic plan. And I think part of the struggle there lies in knowing that there's often a long laundry list of stuff to do, and that your school can't necessarily get to all of it, or at least get to all of it in a timely fashion. And having been ahead twice, I know that we serve many, many different stakeholders. Sometimes those laundry lists are somewhat political. And as a school leader, I know I have always felt the primary imperative to make sure that what I am prioritizing and what I'm asking the community to prioritize is truly and genuinely strategic. And so one of the new areas that we're also thinking about in terms of supporting schools is in providing strategic planning support. So how do we go from the accreditation process, which is clearly about the validation of the great work that you already do, and then helping you to think about growth, and then having a disciplined process, really concrete and practical tools and frameworks, and then exemplars of what great strategic plans look like. In my mind, there's a big difference between a strategic plan and then a roadmap, which prioritizes elements of a plan, and then an actual set of action steps, which are sequenced and detailed and very tactical. And it's easy to walk away from the school improvement plan having done it takes so much work to go through accreditation, and we know that, and we appreciate that, and we celebrate that. And it's easy to kind of breathe out a sigh of relief and say, okay, we're done. But that's actually the point at which really the most important work begins. And so again, strategic planning is an area where we believe that we can provide some helpful resources. The last thing I'll say, Alexander, is that it's really important to me and to the Middle States staff that we find ways to connect member school to member school. The whole point of a network is that the value in the network is distributed across many, many, many different nodes. And rather than treating our relationship with you as only kind of a vertical us to you or one point to one point, we also want to think about the horizontal and the diagonal lines that connect us to you and you to people all over the world, because chances are somebody else has the same question that you have. Chances are somebody else has already begun to experiment in an area that could be helpful to you and share some early lessons. And so once again, that's something that we're looking forward to presenting to you over the course of this year of the Middle States Network.
All right. Thank you, Christian. We have another question here from Joy Watson, and her school is based in St. Petersburg, Russia. And the question is, what are some tectonic shifts that you anticipate over the course of the next 5 to 10 years that will affect education?
Yeah, this is a doozy. This is a big question. And as I mentioned, a group of us from Middle States spent yesterday, a good chunk of yesterday, talking about what we call forces at play. So these are forces that could be headwinds, they could be tailwinds. It's probably highly contextual, but they're not necessarily good or bad by themselves. It really depends on who you are and where you are in the world. But some of those, well, we kind of put them into 3 big categories. So we see social change, social unrest even, as being one big bucket of forces. Another big bucket of forces we framed through the lens of a title of a Kevin Kelly book called What Technology Wants, that the power of technology and the exponential increase in the power of technology makes it a force unlike any other in the world. So some of the forces that we looked at fall into that category. And then the last category of forces are really demographic. So I'll start there. One thing that really strikes us, because it's already baked in, there's nothing anybody can do to change this right now, is something that we're calling the silver tsunami. So by 2050, a huge percentage of people living in the United States, in Europe, in Japan and China will be over the age of 60. And the world probably isn't really prepared right now to have an increasing number of people who are moving into their old age, who may have already had one encore career and may have now be looking at a second encore career after having had a first sort of 20 or 30 or 40 year run in a certain type of work. Another major demographic shift has to do with migration. Some of our schools are in places where there's displacement due to climate collapse or displacement due to military or political conflict. And it's probably a conservative estimate that over the next decade and beyond, at least 250 million people around the world are going to be migrating, and often that migration will be forced. They're not going to be choosing it. And that's going to have significant implications on what schools receive those students, on what schools are maybe hemorrhaging those students. We wonder whether new schools will need to be created to serve these migrant populations. And there's some crossover here with that middle bucket around what technology wants. We know, well, I shouldn't say we know, but we would say with an extremely high degree of confidence that over the next decade, people are going to spend more time in virtual spaces, not less time. Those virtual spaces might be as basic as what we're doing right now, having a virtual meeting on Zoom, but those virtual spaces might include things like augmented and mixed reality or virtual reality. And it could be both an opportunity especially for displaced people, to have schools that are hybrid or in certain cases totally virtual. And we're also mindful of the potential threats to students and adults, mental well-being, physical well-being. So that's another major trend that we looked at yesterday, and that sort of crosses over with some of the demographic shifts that I mentioned. Another major trend in the technology bucket has to do with kind of the flip side of that coin. So we wonder whether there's going to be an increasing toggling back and forth between being kind of what we call remote on almost all the time, always having a chat box open, always having a virtual meeting to go to. If you're a student, almost always having an online space to go to check your homework, to do an online class, to submit your homework, right? And that can be incredibly empowering in a lot of ways. It could also be incredibly taxing. And so we wonder whether there might be a swing in the other direction to balance that out, where we begin to value more and more our physical presence experiences. And a big question we have is, what will that mean for school? And how will schools design for the mental and physical well-being of our stakeholders, obviously students first and foremost, but also our teachers and our staff members, and how can we use design to really bring out the best of both sets of experiences? I don't think we should be naive and expect that we're going to reverse the flow of technology and spend less time and less resources on virtual. But how can design allow us to make the most of that experience? And then how can we also use design to make the most of our physical experiences, physical presence experiences? And then finally, thinking about social change and social unrest. Frankly, these are a little bit more dystopian in terms of trends. We are really concerned about the ongoing threats to democracy. We're concerned about what we consider to be reliable information versus misinformation versus disinformation. We thought a little bit yesterday about the different kinds of dynamics that come to the surface when we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging. And we're also especially mindful that that very question means something very different to our schools, depending on where they are. And we also have great respect for the individual missions and identities and values of our schools. So it's not as though there's a one-size-fits-all answer to any of these trends, but those are some of the major trends. And the last thing I'll say before we move on to the next question is that we didn't just randomly generate these trends from our own thinking. We relied on a few resources that I encourage you all to check out as well. One of them is an organization, a think tank in Europe called In Future. Another is a think tank here in the United States called the Institute for the Future, which is, I think, the oldest futures thinking organization in the US. It's based in Palo Alto. We looked at resources from the World Economic Forum and we looked at resources from MIT's Sloan School of Business, and finally from McKinsey's recent reports over the last 3 to 4 years on major trends. So I just said a whole lot, and probably was maybe a little bit more than you bargained for, but as I said, we take the question of futures thinking and forecasting and scenario planning really seriously, because we know that the extent to which that we can prepare and be agile and nimble, the better we are equipped to serve you.
Thank you, Christian. We've gotten a couple of questions in the chat about MSA's new standards. So I'm going to go ahead and ask you to just share a little bit about the new standards. And then specifically, have you had any takeaways or aha moments when kind of reading through the new standards that you would be willing to share with member schools?
Yeah, another great question. I really appreciate all of these questions, so thank you. So as you may know, we went through a pretty lengthy process over the last couple of years to examine the existing 12 standards, and then through feedback from member schools, from our commissioners, from our staff members, we actually reduced the number of standards from 12 to 5. And our 2 commissions on elementary schools and on secondary schools approved the changes to those standards in November of last year, and frankly, we think that it's going to streamline the process and make the process more relevant to the work that you all do. We piloted those standards with, I believe it was 12 schools, and we learned a lot from those pilots, and our AVPs in particular were really in regular dialogue with the 12 member schools who helped us to pilot those 5 standards. And our hope is that those new 5 standards will go into effect this coming spring and then beyond. So I think my big takeaway is, again, having been a head of school and knowing that we are really asking a lot of our school community when it comes time for an accreditation or an interim visit. And we ask a lot because it matters. The work of accreditation really matters to assure quality and to commit to growth. I believe that the compression from 12 to 5 allows us to be more focused on the 5 categories that matter the most. And it makes the what I consider to be an already really good and healthy process even more practical. And by the way, those standards are on our website if you haven't already seen them.
All right, thank you. We have a question here from John Sturgis, who is one of our commissioners. And John is wondering about kind of stewarding our finances. So his question is, in budgetary tightness, what measures will MSA take to reinforce the importance of accreditation and membership?
Thanks for that question, John. I'm looking forward to seeing you soon for some commission work. So we're really careful, and frankly, a lot of that is to John's great credit and the credit of the other members of our finance committee for Middle States. We're really thoughtful about the dues that we charge our member schools and about the way that we steward those resources in support of accreditation, but also in support of innovation. And I think that's why I'm here. I think it's why the commissioners asked me to join the organization, and it's why I'm excited to have joined the organization. So I think of the stewardship of finances as really focusing on 2 things. One, we need to ensure that our member schools have the best possible experience around accreditation, and that is both the before, during, and after, right? There's a lot of work that needs to happen before accreditation, and we have a great volunteer services team and a great set of associate vice presidents for accreditation, who are those liaisons to support the work that happens before accreditation. It takes a tremendous amount, as you know, if you've been on a visiting team or if you've sent people from your school to visiting teams, it takes a tremendous amount of commitment and discipline and frankly, time and energy for our visiting teams to do the work of the school visit, to write up those reports and to present those reports to our advisory committees and ultimately to our commissions for approval. And then finally, we need to ensure that once accreditation has taken place, that we can get you your ONOA, your official notice of accreditation, and your certificate, and also be on hand to answer those follow-up questions that may have to do with things like, how do we do a strategic plan now? Or I really need to facilitate this element of change based on our growth plan. How do I do that? Or what other schools should I be in touch with? Who else is out there trying to wrangle with the same issue that we're wrangling with? So one set of our stewardship of finances focuses on making sure that we have the staff and the access to resources to, again, provide a quality experience before, during, and after accreditation. But another part of the stewardship of our finances, which again come from your member dues, has to do with facilitating innovative approaches to school evolution. And I've mentioned some of those things already. I'll mention them again now, and look forward to seeing you at a lot of these experiences over the course of this year of the MSA network. But we will be inviting subject matter experts like Michael Horn and others to participate in interviews and Q&As with you. There's, in my estimation, really nobody better out there than a guy like Michael Horn to talk about the research basis and the thought leadership basis for how schools can evolve. And one of the things I love about Michael Horn is that he respects the incredible diversity of schools around the world. If you read his book, you'll see he talks about traditional K-12 schools. He talks about career and technical schools. He talks about learning service providers. He talks about fully virtual schools. He talks about homeschooling. He talks about micro schools. He talks about large public school districts. He talks about tiny little single room schoolhouses. But he is a pragmatist, and being able to offer our members access to someone like that, and maybe offer the opportunity to ask this guy direct questions is something that we can only do when we have financial resources to bring someone like that into our community, or to create new programs like the change leadership program that I mentioned earlier, or to devote internal staff resources to setting up and then maintaining and growing online learning communities, as Betty mentioned before, whether they're on LinkedIn or Twitter or Facebook or other places. So, those are some of the ways in which we steward your membership dues, and we're grateful to the investment that you make in Middle States.
Thank you, Christian. We have a question here from Alexis Torres, another one of our commissioners based in Puerto Rico. And MSA has a long history of working with schools in Puerto Rico. So Alexis's question is, do you see Puerto Rico accredited organizations as facilitators towards increasing the number of accredited schools in other Latin American countries?
Wow, that's a great question, Alexis. And I haven't thought about it until this very moment. So thank you for giving me something to think about. Also, I don't know if you're in Puerto Rico right now, but if you are, again, my prayers and best wishes for your safety and the welfare of your entire community and really the whole island. I think the best way I can answer your question is to say that the Middle States standard for accreditation, I view as the gold standard, or at least a gold standard, because I do want to pay respect to our peers at other accreditation agencies. But if we are accrediting schools in Puerto Rico, that means that they have achieved a level of excellence that is worthy of communicating to the rest of the world. And to the extent that there are cultural, linguistic, and other factors that can be helpful in encouraging that kind of commitment among other schools in Latin America, I would love to see that happen. Again, I'm thinking out loud a little bit. I haven't thought about this question until hearing it from you, and I appreciate it. And I'm also going to pose that to our staff to see what they think about it, and we'll get back to you with maybe more thoughts on that.
Thank you. We have a lot of questions coming in asking you to reiterate and provide the details for the Michael Horn event again. And then I think after that, we'll take one last question and wrap it up.
Sure. So once again, Michael Horn's latest book is called From Reopen to Reinvent. He will be joining us for a live interview and then a Q&A on a webinar, just like this one that we're on right now, on October 24th. I believe the time is 12 p.m. Eastern time. I will check that while I'm talking to you. But you will get an official invite to that event probably by the end of this week. So be on the lookout for that. And at least on my calendar, I will confirm that we are expecting to host Michael Horn on October 24th, 12 p.m. Eastern. So you might have to do a little bit of math depending on what time zone you're in. And I really hope that you'll be able to join us. And once again, really encourage you to pick up this book, which I cannot say enough good things about. And Henry, I know that you want to move us to maybe one last question, and I'll ask you to do that in just a moment. But it's been hard for me to kind of scan the chat while I've been talking. But one thing I have noticed is a couple of places where people have asked about schools that serve students with disabilities. And I just want to say that this is a question that's actually deeply personal for me. So my wife and I have two children. One is a typical kid. He just started his freshman year of high school, and he goes to an all-boys Catholic school. And then we also have a daughter who is a year and a half younger than him, and she was born with very significant and profound lifelong disabilities. She doesn't walk, she doesn't talk, she doesn't really control her motor movements particularly intentionally. She goes to a school that serves all students with special needs, and in particular the kinds of disabilities, global disabilities that she has. And one of the reasons why I felt so strongly about coming to Middle States is that I know that the school she attends is a tremendous school, and they are Middle States accredited. And it means the world to me that we can put that stamp of approval on schools that serve every kind of population. So for those who've asked about schools with special needs students, thank you for that, and know that my heart is very much with you. So Henry, I think maybe we have time for one last question.
We do. All right, so the last question is, as member schools, how can member schools contribute to MSA aside from just paying annual dues?
Yeah, well, I sure hope that you think of lots of opportunities to participate in the Middle States Network. And I will repeat two that I've already said. I'll repeat these two because I feel like this is where you can really make an impact, not only on your own growth and development and on the growth and development of your school community, but you can have an influence over other member schools within Middle States. And to me, that gets to our core mission of ensuring a quality education for every student, because those are the young people who are going to go out and contribute to the common good and be effective citizens. So the two ways that I would really invite you to participate beyond paying your dues would be, first, to think about talented people from your school community at all levels. The first school visit I went on, I believe, was in 2000. I had only been a full-time teacher for 3 years, so I was pretty new as an educator. And I like to think that I contributed a lot. I sure learned a lot. That was unbelievably powerful professional development for me. And then, of course, later on, as a department chair and then as a school leader, I was on the internal planning teams and then, of course, spearheading teams. I've also chaired education committees of boards of trustees where we had a really important trustee fiduciary oversight function. And knowing that we, meaning Middle States, knowing that Middle States was sending really high quality people to those visiting teams was a relief and a sign of Middle States' commitment to a high quality process. So again, I encourage you to think about who are the talented people at all levels of your organization. They may be faculty, they may be staff, they may be 23 years old, they may be 73 years old. And I would say for those of you who are in particular school leaders, heads of school, principals, presidents, executive directors, whatever your title is, look for the up and comers, look for the people who have a high potential, but maybe who haven't been put into a position of formal authority yet. And then the second thing I would invite you to do is to participate in the opportunities that we're going to be offering over the course of this year and beyond. So I really hope that we'll see you on October 24th for the Michael Horn event. And I really hope that you'll sign up for the other things that we're going to offer this year, because again, your participation, your contributions matter not just for you and your school community, but you can have a positive influence over the entire Middle States network. So thank you for considering those contributions.
So thank you once again, Christian, for answering so many of our questions. And as expected, we had many questions that we were not able to get to today. So we will be doing some follow-up with folks that were not able to have their question asked. I'm going to go ahead and put Christian's contact information up on the screen for everyone in case you want to reach out directly. But I will turn it over to Christian to close us out with some final words while I do that.
Thanks, Henry. And as Henry said, he's sharing my contact information. So please do feel free to be in touch. I'm always happy to hear from our school leaders, and our relationship with you matters tremendously to me. So your presence here today is really heartwarming. This has been recorded, as Henry said or rather as Dr. Kraft said at the start of this webinar. So we will make a recording of this available to you and other members of your school community after today. So please be on the lookout for that. And I would simply conclude by thanking you for being members of Middle States, and to invite you to look forward to that invitation to the Michael Horn event on October 24th. And finally, and I think most importantly, just to express another heartfelt thank you to you for doing what I consider to be the most important and worthiest work that we can do, which is to shape the lives of young people, again, so that they can contribute to their local communities, their regional, state, national communities, the global community, to be effective citizens. And that's true for someone who's learning to be a mechanic. It's true for someone who's 2 years old and learning how to socialize with other kids. It's true for the high school senior who's thinking about going off to college and a career. It's true for all of the many, many, many different students that you serve and that we are happy to support. So again, thank you. I look forward to talking to you soon, and we'll be in touch.